right, welcome everyone. We get started here in just a moment. Gonna post this right on the Twitter feed. All righty. And I'll get the chat pulled up here. We'll wait for a few more people to get in before we get started. As we have Denny Hamlin celebrating so far his second victory of the season here in Texas. Just to make an adjustment to the camera, you don't need too much of this. Yep, you got the Darth Potato Head there in the background. And we got a lot going on back there. We've been making some changes here to the setup here last few days. There we go. Get this a little bit lower so you don't need as much view above my head there. So let's take a look here. Whoop, 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 whoop. Oh my goodness. All right. All right. All right. There we go. All right. So the first race at Texas is in the books. Unofficially, Denny Hamlin, your winner today, winning his second race of the season, his first since the Daytona 500 at the beginning of the season. But we are still waiting, of course, for the results of post-race inspection, which was an issue before the race. Ryan Newman didn't pass pre-race inspection and was sent to the back of the field, although he never spent that much time at the in the 39th position at the start of the race. There were actually several other cars that voluntarily fell behind him before the start, as well as Alex Bowman in the number 88 falling back further. So we now wait to see the results from inspection. And I'm just getting my notes pulled up here in the meantime. Could have been a very dramatic set of circumstances. Actually turned out to be a pretty good battle for last place, I got to say. Say what you will about the race for the lead. And although there was some drama there at the end between Kyle Busch and his teammate Denny Hamlin there, a little slip there, and that was the difference. But the back of the field, just putting together stuff for the article tonight, seemed like it was actually pretty close at the back of the field. It stayed about single file in the early stages there. It looked like it was going to be Timmy Hill and not Joey Gase, as shown in the original broadcast, showing that the 66 was driven by somebody that wasn't even at the speedway this today after running the Xfinity race yesterday. Timmy Hill making his first Cup start of the season, the number 66, and different set of circumstances there. Looking over the notes here, Timmy just avoided losing a lap there at the early stages of the race. They had caution, the first caution for Eric Jones spinning out, kept the 66 from losing a lap. He didn't actually lose a lap until the 34th lap of the race to Jimmy Johnson. And then you had issues for Corey LaJoie. He came into the battle there when he bounced off the wall there, had to make an unscheduled stop, didn't have any smoke coming off the Go Fast Racing injury. And then what was interesting to see, especially looking at the race view angle of this, was a lot of drivers actually kind of, when they have a setback like that, catching back up and passing slower traffic a bit easier. I know that Hill got passed by LaJoie at that point, and then there was a later issue with some of the other teams further up. But certainly the biggest thing we were certainly looking to see what would happen would be Brad Keselowski potentially getting his first last place finish. However, as we've seen with a lot of these other contenders, we saw this before with Jimmy Johnson, we saw it with Casey Kane, Clint Boyer, other drivers that had triple-digit streaks without a single last place finish, and Kevin Harvick, top among them. He ended up actually getting back out there after about 55 laps in the garage area with problems somewhere in the rear end of the car. They got back out there, gained a couple of spots, and did actually, where did they finish in that one? Did they finish outside the bottom five? I think they were pretty close to doing so. It's pretty competitive there at the back of the field. But the last place battle wasn't actually settled until about lap 204. That was the point where Kyle Larson, after his very serious crash there in turn 2, sent him to the back of the field. climbed out of the car on pit road when there was a fire behind the right front, dropped the number 42 back to 39th place, his first last place finish of the season. And unfortunately, Kyle is, as pointed out by other people on Twitter, there, really having trouble at Texas in particular. A lot of bad hits in those first couple of corners, and he's had a number of other last place finishes through last year as well. So it's not that long of a streak there for him. Yes, Keselowski in 36th spot there, showing unofficially. He was not quite able to escape the bottom five. Bailey Curry, the last of the cars, it looks like they were running under power. He was 14 laps down in the 35th position, making his second Cup start, his first one since Phoenix. But it was interesting to see what was happening with the two there. I mean, we haven't seen, I mentioned earlier during the race there that because the most recent time that number two finished last in a Cup Series race was the 2008 Series finale at Homestead. Actually, the most recent two last place finishes for the number two car both happened in the Homestead finale. I believe it was 2006 with Kurt Busch that they finished last in that event. So, a bit unusual to see that kind of trend there, but in the randomness of racing, you still get some patterns back there. Let's take another look at. I want to get the full results here. And we still wait and see if Kyle Larson's finish stands up there. But overall, it would have been interesting to see the actual. Ooh, there we go. I'm sorry, I'm just seeing the tweet here about Michael McDowell having a good run in the race there. Got to give a shout out to him for sure. Like, where do you actually shake out in there? 15th place finish, fantastic run for him. And of course, when you talk about Michael McDowell in Texas, the first thing everybody's going to talk about is going to be that huge qualifying wreck in 2008, back when he was driving for Michael Waltrip Racing. It's good to see him, get a good finish out there and have people start talking about him for reasons other than that. Obviously, between then and now, we've seen him on NASCAR several times as a last place finisher for Phil Parsons Racing and Prism Motorsports and some of these other small teams along the way. But a good run for him there. He seemed like he'd stayed on the lead lap, I think, pretty much the whole race, except for the exchanges of pit stops. He seemed like he was up there as high as inside the top 10 there at one point. But yes, 15th place finish unofficially for him. And certainly I would think his best run since the Daytona 500 as well. Had that mechanical issue at Atlanta that put him back and all those deals. So, yes, the 2020 schedule, I want to talk about that as well. We'll kind of get into that a bit as we keep waiting for the results to come through here. Let's take this. I think it's pretty clear who the championship four favorites are at this point. If we've had, four winners basically dominated, we're going to see 2 wins for Joey Logano next week. And so everybody that has won has only been the winners this year, but it'll be interesting to see if that shakes out. Let me take a look here. Let me unfix that. Good run for Clint Boyer, as was mentioned in the broadcast there. He's certainly had a difficult start to the year. Of course, you know that from looking at the NASCAR website with his last place finish at Fontana, falling out in that event. And, a good way to bounce back there with the runner-up finish. Daniel Suarez having a good finish there in third. Eric Jones bouncing back from the spin at the beginning to get fourth. And Jimmy Johnson, your 5th place finisher so far, with winning the pole and leading 61 laps at the start of the race. But enough about those guys. Let's look further back in the field here. Landon Castle had a good bit of recovery there. He did finish 30th, 8 laps down, but he was last at one point as well. Had an unscheduled stop early in the race that put him a couple laps back. Was able to kind of claw his way back up a few positions there. Ross Chastain, another one of the competitors that actually attempted all 3 races this year, and as was mentioned, of course, actually having run all the top 3 series across the top 3 series through the first few rounds this year. We had a number of other drivers attempt that this weekend. We had Garrett Smithley in the number 77. He finishes 32nd in the Cup race. You had Bailey Curry running in the 35th position. I think did Curry run the truck race? I know he ran the Xfinity race. I seem to think he ran the truck race. Got to check my own notes on that. Was he in the 1? Yeah, he got swapped into the 1. That's right. That's when Travis Kvapil wasn't sure he was going to start the race this weekend and got brought in there at the last second. Sue, the DNQ for both those? That was too bad. Gosh, let me look at that. Was that a DNQ? Gotta look at that again. I'm a little behind on there on getting the articles done. It'd be a shame if the 17. Yeah, 17 didn't make it in the Xfinity race. That's surprising. Okay. Gosh. Okay, well, attempted the 3, but not making the show there. And that it seemed like the Curry was having some good runs earlier this year with that, and of course the lower funded effort with Rick Ware's team. But yeah, no, I correct myself. Yeah, didn't make the start in the race there, and doing that. So let me get, and then yeah, the truck race as well in the 1. Obviously, the 1 teams struggled a bit this year. They had a couple of withdrawals. Yeah, they withdrew again here, shown at least on the entry for Texas. It's interesting that it's under the Vision Motorsports angle on Racing Reference and under a Toyota. That's I know he has that as the banner on his Twitter page, but I thought it was still a I thought that was still a Beaver Motorsports entry. So I stand corrected on that as well. Interesting. So, there. Welcome aboard there, Judson. Good to see a few people here in the chat here so far. Still getting everything sorted out there as the Texas race is just wrapped up. We are currently, again, waiting for the results from technical inspection. And we are about approximately 14 minutes into the wait from the start of that. Huh. That's still surprising that Curry didn't start those. I could have sworn he started those races, but yeah, I'm completely wrong about that. So, yeah. Shoot. Well, I'm glad he started the Cup race at least as well. Gets the more laps you can get, the better. I apologize for that. I see the articles on there. People were asking about who had the most starts without a last place finish in the series right now. And of course, this now goes up 1 from the original list. Going into Texas, the longest streak among the drivers that actually did start the Cup race today. Brad Keselowski tops that list as with 347. The only other driver that has more than 100 Cup starts but has not yet finished last in a Cup points race has been Chase Elliott, which has 119. So, really goes to show, another aspect of how he's started out in the sport. Daniel Suarez, again, we mentioned him with a good run he had today in the Cup race, 78 starts. He's 3rd ranked amongst the entrants today. William Byron with 42. And then you get down to the newcomers and the part-timers there after that. You have Parker Kligerman with 17. He drove the number 96 today for Gaunt Brothers Racing. You have Ryan Preece with 11. Daniel Hemrick with 8. Matt Tifft with 6. And then the aforementioned Bailey Curry with 1. That's going into the race, of course, today. He had his 2nd Cup start. So all those go up again. And Keselowski now goes into Bristol with 348 starts without a Cup Series last place finish in the top 3 series. And going into a track where he's had a lot of success in the past. And, after the win at Martinsville, it'll be interesting to see what he can do. Let's see. Vision Motorsports swapped 35 for 1 points. Interesting. Yeah. See, I wasn't aware of that. That's interesting. I know the Mark Beaver team has been really kind of running on the seems like they're really struggling to kind of get things rolling again. But interesting. So let's see here. Let's go back. We're going to catch this as the celebrations are still underway here. Let's take a look. All right, let's go back to the Truck Series race in general here and catch back up with that. Unfortunate to see Norm Benning miss the race there again. I know that these races. It's surprising that the Truck Series field actually had more than enough entries for the field in recent years, especially. Of course, they moved the date. Originally, this was going to be the race that they had in November. Perhaps that's one reason they moved it. They didn't seem to get enough entries to have actually 32 trucks. The June race seems to have even more of an issue about that. And of course, the June race this year is going to be interesting because now it's going to have Greg Biffle apparently attempting that run, driving for Kyle Busch. So that's going to be interesting to see on that. I never thought, Greg Biffle would be a source of excitement in the sport. I know when we last saw him, unfortunately was having a lot of struggles there with Roush Racing and having some frustrations with the 16 team there and keeping going. And then before that, He was having several runs at the restrictor plate races where it seemed like he was just content to finish second, or at least the optics of it seemed that way. I'm sure he would much rather have won, any number of those Daytona and Talladega races at a time where Matt Kenseth was really reaching his peak before leaving Roush Fenway himself. But we'll see what happens with that. But well, basically officially at this point, pending any other results, Josh Realm, your last place finisher for the Truck Series race, had some issues in qualifying with the engine. They couldn't get a good competitive lap in on there. And from the looks of it here, he didn't even complete a lap in the race. I'm unclear as to whether he attempted to start the race and he just didn't complete a lap, or if the truck was just in the garage and he focused on the efforts with Jesse Iwuji there in the number 34. But regardless, the result is the same. Finishes last in the event, qualified last, and rounds out the field there. Realm's an interesting figure because we haven't talked about him in a little while. I was looking at his original article from a while back, and we look at this last car. Is he the one that he was born? That's right. Yeah, that's the one that was nicknamed the African Squirrel, Josh Realm. Born in California, grew up in Nigeria, where his family did humanitarian work, and then raced go-karts in Vancouver. So a long roundabout way, and then ultimately finding your way into NASCAR's top 3 series, and now as a team owner, running the 33 and the 34 last year or so. And but unfortunately, not a good run for them this time around, finishing in the 32nd spot. The rest of the bottom 5 filled out by several accidents. It seemed like the combination of the PJ1 and the new configuration of the track filled the bottom 5 pretty quickly. It seemed to set up, what was going to be basically a crash-filled cup race here, although it didn't turn out that way, certainly. But in the Truck Series race, Harrison Burton wrecked out, shortened up the back of the Hunt Brothers Pizza Machine for Kyle Busch. Angela Ruck back in the Al Neese machine. Looked like it was the same paint scheme that she drove for Joe Nemechek earlier this year. I don't know if it was literally the same truck, but it seemed to have the same look to it there. She ended up finishing in the 30th spot. 29th goes to Gus Dean, your last place finisher last week in Martinsville. This week he ends up in the 29th position. And then Anthony Alfredo had a scary accident there, crash, and then some fire underneath the truck there, finishing in the 28th spot. Rounding out the bottom 5. And basically, and then of that group, I believe when I was just drafting the article here, I believe only Josh Realm and Gus Dean had bottom 5 finishes earlier this year, so they round out that group. Got to give a shout out, of course, to Corey Roper, again having a great finish out there, finished in the 12th position for his owner driver operation in the Preferred Industrial Contractors machine. Good run for him. Let's see where that ranks him with these other finishes he's had. I believe, okay, yeah, that would be his season best finish, actually. He did qualify 5th at Las Vegas, but finished 24th there. His season best was originally 16th at Atlanta, so he improves on that by 4 spots. So a good run for him. Brennan Poole, good run for Stephen Lane and the All Out Motorsports team, getting in the 9th spot there, and 1 spot behind Tyler Dipple, who I believe as well got a career best finish, the number 02 for Randy Young's team, the Young's Motorsports effort. Good to see him get a good showing there. And of course, in front of that, you got to talk about Ross Chastain again. And again, we've talked about this in the past. Chastain's efforts this year, it's almost not really a surprise anymore. He's seems to be consistently top 10 in the the Truck Series, consistently on at least the lead lap in the Xfinity Series, and then the Cup Series, bringing it home under power in the Cup Series, even with very limited resources with all 3 of the efforts that he's driving for. So good run for him. But in victory lane, it was Kyle Busch again, but you knew he was in the race, so you knew that was almost an eventuality on that. Good run for some of these other drivers a bit further back in the field. Let's take a look. All right. Thanks for coming by, Judson. Sorry you couldn't stick around, but we'll have more efforts here in the next few weeks here. All right. So, but pretty competitive truck race, though. I mean, it was good to, again, Brett Moffitt, again, having a little bit of bad luck there with GMS racing effort there, leading 33 laps, setting up further back in the field. Let me turn that off. It's getting a little distracting there. All right. Good to see Jesse Little in the 13th spot, the JJL racing team. Chad Little and the Little family there They got some good horses under the hood of that number 97 Ford there. A good 13th place finish for them, rounding out a solid weekend for them in Texas as we saw them rejoin the circuit. Looking ahead to the Xfinity Series here this time around, Jeff Green with his first last place finish of the year, which is a bit perhaps unusual for those of you who have followed NASCAR for some time. Of course, in the interim, besides his runs at the restrictor plate races and some other isolated races along the way, is more often than not still been a start and park driver to help out the RSS team's efforts. But you got to say that it's whatever has been happening over there in that shop has really been helping. Old Ryan Sieg himself finishing in the 10th spot. And I believe he hasn't finished, what was the statistic? He hasn't finished worse than 11th this year. Yeah, that's correct there. He hasn't finished worse than 11th. Already on to a career best season, looking to point his way into the championship, even if they don't win a race this year. And although, I mean, if they keep running like this, they're going to be knocking on the door, pretty hard here. Their season best still remains their 4th place run at Daytona, but definitely a good start for him there. I mean, a great start for him. Still finishing in the 10th spot there at Texas amidst all the accidents and everything. And also the ongoing story that we've been following here in the last few episodes of this show, looking at Brandon Brown versus Gray Galding, the efforts between these two smaller efforts, especially the Brandon Brown effort where they haven't had any backing. This week, Brown kind of made his move here and still finished 17th in the race, whereas Galding slipped a little bit and ended up 21st at the finish. Brown ended up looks like the 3rd car 1 lap down, and the number 86 had several fans' names on the rear deck lid of the 86, so it's good to see any kind of new decals or anything on that car, and hopefully that'll be a sign for things to come here. This is a driver and a team that haven't finished worse than 18th, which was their run in the Daytona race to start the season off, and their season best remains their 13th place finish in Atlanta. And, there's different ways that you can measure that. Certainly in some cases you can think that maybe that's not that impressive, but to consistently perform like that, it's hard for that even, if you're a good, if you're a mid-tier Cup Series team, you think of like JTG Daugherty Racing, for example, or some of these other efforts like that. They have bad luck and they end up with like a 30th place finish or, sometimes even worse. Great job by Brandon Brown and the Brandonville Motorsports team to get good runs out there. Certainly hope that things work out better for him on the sponsorship front. As I mentioned, Gray Galding did lose a few positions there, finishing 21st, which is now the 2nd worst finish that he's had this year, other than his 34th place run at the Daytona race. It does end a streak of 4 consecutive finishes of 16th or better, including 2 finishes of 16th in a row at both Phoenix and Fontana. But even then, finishing under power in all those starts, still having a good start to this year. So again, I know with Gray Galding, it was kind of a rush getting him into the Cup Series there, and perhaps now in the Xfinity Series, he can kind of work out a level that he can develop his driving career more. And perhaps if the opportunity does come for him to get back into Cup, then it's going to help them out there, certainly. So good run for him there. Unfortunately, he ended up a couple laps down there, but still finishing that race under power. Looking in the rest of the results here, I know this was mentioned also on Twitter. Of course, you have to talk about Mario Gosselin's team, the DGM racing team. Both Josh Williams and Ronnie Bassett Jr. finishing nose to tail 14th and 15th. Actually, technically not nose to tail, Bassett being 1 lap down. Williams having a good run there in the 14th spot. I believe that's a new career best for him. It certainly is for Bassett, who's I believe this is only his 2nd or 3rd start. And it was good to see the number 90 team actually have a good turnaround after they had to park a backup car at Fontana after Cesar Baccarella's rough weekend up there. So it was good to see them get a good turnaround. Looking at the results here for Josh Williams, his 6th start of the season. And yes, that is his new best. His previous career best was 16th at Las Vegas earlier this year. So the 1.5 mile track still helping out Josh Williams as he now drives the numbers 36 this year. So a good run for both of them, a great run actually, and certainly a good effort for the team. And with new teams, you can't not talk about the XCI racing team, XCI racing. Did I say XCE? XCI racing team with Jeffrey Earnhardt, even though it's basically a Joe Gibbs racing effort. I mean, there's no illusions about that between the Toyota effort and the sponsorship there, but still as basically a new team. An 8th place finish there at Texas, their first time out. A good start for them as well. So checking that out. Seeing a looking at your comment there, Beast of Metal, the Carolina Nut Company on the hood of the JJL truck. I'm not exactly sure if there's some kind of connection between the two teams, but with how few Fords there are in the truck series right now, it wouldn't be surprising if maybe there's some kind of an effort there to kind of bring everybody on the same level. So we'll see what happens there. But at the front of the field, meanwhile, Kyle Busch, your winner, the Xfinity race, he just keeps racking them up, trying to reach that 100 mark, at which point he's supposedly going to retire from at least Xfinity competition. But we find out what happens from there. Good run again for Tommy Joe Martins, finishing in the 19th spot for BJ McLeod. Good finish for him. He finishes one spot behind Kaz Gralla, who made his finally return to Xfinity competition, although not with the Fury Race Cars team. This time driving for Richard Childress Racing, beginning of a partial schedule that he's going to run for the remainder of this year. Good 18th place finish for him with the Childress efforts, bringing back the car that Daniel Hemrick drove last season, most recently at the Homestead finale. But Tommy Joe Martin's a great run for him in the 99. Again, just keeping the fenders on it and getting the best finish that he can. And looking further back, Tyler Hill looped the number 66 at one point there, still gets a 28th place finish. And then you get further back in the field there. The bottom five ended up being kind of an all-star group that we saw in the Cup Series here almost. Brad Keselowski's bad luck in the Xfinity Series continues in a perplexing direction. He now backs the number 12 into the wall on the Saturday race, finishes in the 36th position, and part of the bottom five there, along with Tyler's brother Timmy Hill, who pulled the number 13 in after 20 laps with brake issues, just 4 laps after Jeff Green's exit from the race. Ray Black Jr., Greg Alding's teammate at the SS Greenlight Racing team, he finishes in the 35th position, had a very hard crash the first couple corners. And Cole Custer, his tangle with Brandon Jones halted his bid at winning Texas once again here. Started 7th in the race, ended up finishing 34th to round out the bottom five. He gets his first bottom five finish of the year, as well as Ray Black Jr. in that regard. But again, it opened opportunities for some of these other teams to kind of get good runs up there. Unfortunately, nobody had anything for Kyle Busch at the finish of the race. Once the race late race caution came out and kind of jumbled things up a little bit. But still, of course, a lot of controversy over that, of course, is when Jeremy Clements' car stalled and how close he was and to the surface of the track, and if that was willing to be a caution there. But that ended up being the call, and that shook things up a little bit there at the finish of the race. So, yes, looking at, let's take a look. Did Jennifer Jo Cobb get a good finish there? Yes, she did. 18th place. Good mention. Don't want to overlook that. Yeah, Jennifer Jo Cobb in the 18th spot there. Best run, let's see. She's only made the 3 starts this year with Atlanta, Vegas, and then this one at Texas. But her first finish inside the top 20, as you mentioned there. Thank you for mentioning that there, Tad. So we have a good run for her as well. It's good to see. I mean, again, this is another effort that has been going on for a long time, racing very big in the Cobb family. We saw her father race against her at Eldora that one time, and that was really cool. But an 18th place finish for her. Good way to bounce back after the DNQ at Martinsville as well, when they had another driver running her car, the K&N driver, Juan Manuel Gonzalez, in the number 10, missed the cut. But the Martinsville is always a very difficult race to qualify for. We talk about Texas not having very big entry lists. Martinsville and the Truck Series in particular, quite the opposite, usually having large entry lists, and that was certainly the story last week. But unfortunate to have so many accidents in the Texas race there. I think they're still trying to figure out things with the PJ1 and all that. I'm still not entirely sold on the new configuration of the track, although, I mean, I think they've kind of reached the point of no return on that. Got to kind of stick with what they have right now. Memory's already starting to fade a little bit about the way the track used to race before they basically turned it into a half Kentucky or something. But we'll see what happens on that going forward. Looking at the Xfinity results and the Cup Series results as well. So let me go further back here. Okay, we are about 32 minutes into the wait here for the results from technical inspection. Still no word yet, at least from what I'm seeing here. I'm going to pull this up here while we're waiting at the moment, and then we're going to talk about the schedule for 2020 because we can't not talk about that. That is definitely going to be the story. Oh, this is interesting. NASCAR tells Hamlin to celebrate NASCAR tells Hamlin to celebrate respectfully, taking some cars to the wind tunnel. This is posted by Bob Pockris a half hour ago, right about when we started here. So interesting policing now of the burnouts after the race. And again, that's going to certainly be playing a role in what we're waiting for here in the technical inspection. They must want to keep a pretty close eye on these cars and make sure nobody's getting away with anything here. And then we'll pull up the schedule here for 2020. Just want to make sure we get everything pulled up in the right direction here. So let's see. While I'm getting this loaded up here, in the meantime, I made a mention of this on the Twitter account there. The second episode of the Terrible Broadcast will be available publicly on YouTube here at this channel coming up this Wednesday. Those of you who are members of my Patreon, you're actually able to watch it now. Unfortunately, the issue with the video is that it got taken down. I got a copyright strike against it, or at least a copyright claim against it. I don't know if it's a full-on strike, but the 1979 footage, even though none of the audio is used in it, got taken down soon after I posted it. But I've found a third-party site to put it on. It's currently password accessible through the Patreon, so you can watch it now. And that'll probably be the similar arrangement for the race for this Wednesday. What I'm going to do is I'm going to post it by the audio by itself in the YouTube video, so you'll at least have access to that. And then, of course, when it's publicly available, you'll be able to watch the video version on the third-party website, and you'll be able to check that out. Hopefully, that won't be necessary for future episodes of this if this does actually take off. I'm going to kind of look ahead to that, looking ahead, but nothing official on that. But we're still thinking about that. But yes, the video will still be available on there. Yes, and we'll talk about the qualifying issues. We can talk about that too. We got plenty of time to fill here as we wait for the inspection results. But I want to make sure that we talk about the new arrangement in the schedule. First off the bat, I'm glad the West Coast swing is still staying there. You got Las Vegas there right after the Daytona 500. I think that's kind of nice. I mean, if you're going to do the West Coast swing, having the intermediate step of having Atlanta right after Daytona, doesn't really fit quite as well. So, certainly the weather out there seems like it's kind of rough. Although, it seemed like this year we finally had kind of nice weather for that event, but that's always the way it goes. You have an issue with weather several times, and then right when you're about to change it, it kind of works out all right. But putting Atlanta in a different position there back in March, which seems like it was about the date that it used to have back in the original schedule when you had two dates there. When you had that in the spring, had the Motorcraft 500 in the spring and then the Hooters 500 in the fall. Looks like they're more or less getting their date back, which was the old Auto Club date, the old date at the Fontana race, which has now been moved up to Las Vegas's weekend at the beginning of March. That's kind of, rearranging things in a little bit more, logical way there. I don't really have any issues with that. I don't think a lot of people have, at least from what I've heard about it. Let me get some here in the meantime. But yeah, good to see. I almost thought when they originally announced like having the West Coast swing moved up a week, I thought for sure that the Sonoma Raceway was going to get thrown in the middle of that. This year would have been really difficult for that because we've had so much rain come through here. We had an unusually wet winter for what we have in the area. But it still retains its weekend in June, although it moved up a week. It's now going to be back closer to Father's Day weekend, whereas in the past it's usually been towards the end of the month, and we'll get to that part of the schedule as well. But Homestead in March, I'm sure it's still listed as the Ford EcoBoost 400, but I'm thinking that's going to change. At least it sounded like from the last report that the Ford branding was still contingent on them being the season finale. So NASCAR's website still shows it with the Ford sponsorship there, but I'm not. it sounds like that may change. And what it changes to is it going to go back to being the Pennzoil for 400 like it was years ago. Not sure what's going to happen with that, but having the race in March, I think their thinking is that trying to find a date for it where it's not really bad weather or something like that. Like if you do it in the spring, um, I don't know what it's like in Florida in the spring. I mean, any of you out there do know, definitely let me know. But it I'm not sure how that's going to work out because that's going to be I mean, first of all, the sponsorship issue has certainly got to be the biggest concern that Homestead has going forward. But beyond that, that's such a different date. I mean, I don't know if it's going to help or hurt the attendance. I mean, I kind of got used to. I mean, nothing's forever. I mean, we certainly had the finale in Atlanta for years, and then got out of that. But you kind of get used to the unique form of racing there, and just having that track be like just any other race, and having it be a regular point scoring race and not a playoff race of any kind, really. That's going to be kind of an adjustment. I mean, that's going back to the days when it was like a truck series race, either at the opener or very early, very close to it. So, we'll wait and see. I mean, I'm open to it, but I think that feels like a big adjustment right there. Um, Looking further down, I mean, the Martinsville race Saturday night under the lights. It seemed like the writing was on the wall once they put those lights up and started having other races there. I almost thought, I mean, I figured they were going to just take the existing date and have that be a night race, but certainly the Mother's Day weekend and doing a Saturday night race there, that leaves open the opportunity to do that. So, kudos to them. It's going to be basically the last race. One thing that could be very interesting in that you have Martinsville, which, as we've seen, has now been moved to the last cutoff race before Homestead and giving you the last chance to start that. What's neat about this is now you have Martinsville also as the last cutoff before the All-Star race to be qualified for that, assuming the eligibility rules stay the same. You can have somebody win Martinsville at the last second, be eligible for the main event, and then you have a cutoff for that. So I think that's kind of a clever idea there versus having some race like Dover or Kansas be the last cutoff race for that. That seems like a good choice. I think night racing is kind of a little bit of a gimmick for Martinsville. I think Martinsville works better as a day race. Quite honestly, I think that the visuals of it, having the thing I always think of, and I think I mentioned this last week, is you have Martinsville where it's a very pretty track. Everything's nicely, the plants and the shrubbery are all nicely groomed, and you have the hot dogs, and it's very laid back atmosphere out there, small town and everything. But by the end of the race, everybody's car is just beat to heck. You got debris all over the place, you got tire marks all over the place. It's just like a war zone out there, and that makes it really interesting. So yeah. Oh, we're gonna get to the Pocono doubleheader. I see you there, Beast. We're getting down to it. We're going to take our sweet time, but we're almost there. Still keeping Kansas in May. I mean, again, another track doesn't need 2 dates, but it still has it, and they're putting another weekend that's kind of a weird spot because you got it between the 600 at the end at Memorial Day and then the beginning of the march towards Sonoma. Thing I'm always used to when it gets to I guess it'd be Sears Point time. I'm so used to the Pocono, Michigan Sears Point stretch, or even Dover, Pocono, Michigan. Now that's been blown up a bit. We got Dover has already been moved back to May. We got Kansas now at the end of May, and going to Michigan at the beginning of June. If Sears Point couldn't be part of the West Coast swing in the spring, still having the June date. I mean, certainly a summer date is great for getting the fans out there. Maybe having it before the first day of summer will be a little bit cooler. It'll be nice. I know that the some of the posts you've seen, I know from Sonoma's own Twitter, they posted the pictures of how green the track looks in the spring, and it does look nice. You watch some races from like the mid 90s, 1995 race that Dale Earnhardt won out there was run at the beginning of May, and so you had the track was very lush, it just looked beautiful out there. It looked a lot like what you see at some of these other road courses on the circuit when you get down to the summer. But in June, it just gets so dry out there that it looks more like Riverside than than maybe something on the East Coast. But still keep the summer date. I'm glad that's still on there. And that brings us to the Pocono doubleheader. I will say this: if you have a race where you jam both of them in there just to get it out of the way, then why are you even doing that? Like that's the ridiculous part. If it had to be a track that that has to have both its dates crammed into one weekend, it seems only fitting that it should be a track that has historically had its dates too close together. And I know I've gotten some grief on saying that, and I know it's very different for the locals out there, and they have their date in June and they have their date in late July, early August, but that's still too close together. I mean, come on, let's face it here. It's a distinct track. It definitely belongs on the schedule. The Mattioli family has a long history in the sport. It's not an issue of I'm not going to be in the camp of saying that we don't need to have Pocono out there. Quite the opposite. We need to have more tracks that are distinct, like Pocono. Do we need more triangular tracks? I wouldn't even say that, but you can have the two dates there. I mean, if the issue is that they can't get rid of one date or the other right now, then okay, I could see that this would be the only other solution that they could try. And I'd be interested to see how long these races are going to be. Are they going to be both? Is it going to be like in Detroit where they're going to be both shorter, or is it going to be? I mean, the NASCAR schedule still shows them as both 400-mile races. I think they just use these names as placeholders from this year. At least I assume that that's the case. But if you want to talk about Kyle Busch supposedly being tired after running the truck and Xfinity race before running the Cup race today, talking about running both Cup races at 400 miles, it's still different from running them at 500 miles in the past. But I will see. We'll see. I mean, I'll give anything a try here at this point. But it's just I still think it's amusing to me to have the two Pocono races on the same weekend. Again, that's always, I remember thinking that from just years ago. What's happening? Hey there, Red Racer 1985. Thanks for joining in on the group here. Still what we're doing right now is we're just looking over the 2020 schedule here, and I know that everybody else has already had their crack at it here since it came out last week, but we just talked about the two Pocono races there. I know a lot more people have been having issues with the July race in Indianapolis. I know historically that event has already been at the beginning of August before they started moving it around and having it be a chase cutoff race and all that kind of stuff. Since then, moving it to September. They just can't seem to find a place for it. And now what they've done basically is they've moved it into the weekend for the Firecracker 400. Now, I have said in the past that I wouldn't mind if they had each track just got one date. I think that would be the most common sense thing to start reorganizing the schedule, is just start from that standpoint. It's probably just about the only thing in Formula One, for example, that I can get behind, is that they go to each race just one time. I don't know this from a fact, but it seemed like from looking at the history of the sport that giving these tracks two dates was more of a consequence of cutting down the schedule and just having more tracks to fill in the length of the schedule that they already had, or a schedule that was a bit shorter. When you start getting rid of dirt tracks, you start getting rid of tracks that have races of 250 miles or less, and whatever the other criteria were at the time. Although there's actually, okay, I got to make sure I don't spoil this. There's another video that's coming up that's going to have you have some more interesting information about Daytona in July. I'll just leave it at that. But the interesting bit of information there, having Indianapolis in July, it seems like that's trading already a hot part of the year or a rainy part of the year, like we had in September, for an even hotter part of the year, and aggravating some people that had the race at Daytona in July. Of course, now moving in Daytona to the cutoff race into the championship rounds, this sounds like something that people always brought up as kind of a joke, like they're going to have a restrictor plate race be the cutoff for the championship, or have it be the championship race. It sounds like they were actually kind of listening, and they've done that now. That's just going to be a mess. I think that's going to be if the Indianapolis race in July is going to be a mess because of the weather, then having Daytona at the end of August, where, I mean, gosh, you're going to have that right on the edge of hurricane season. I mean, I know the July race at Daytona has had a lot of problems with weather. It has for pretty much the race's entire existence, but especially in recent years, qualifying getting washed out constantly. Having it at that time of the year, I think, is even crazier. But they're going to give it a try and see what happens. They're just kind of sticking with this, having the playoffs start in September, and by golly, they're going to start with that and just do that. But it's I don't know. I'm more concerned about the weather aspect there than I am about it taking basically the weekend that used to have the Bristol night race, because the Bristol night race originally had ever since the playoffs became a thing, the Bristol night race kind of lost a little bit of that consequence in the championship battle. It seemed like in the past, at least to me, was talking about this a while back. I always viewed the Southern 500 at Darlington as kind of the start of the push towards the championship, even before the playoff system came in. It seemed like the Bristol night race was the last bit of the part of the season where the commentary was always just focused on who would win this race. And it would be like, okay, who would win this race? Who would win that race? It seemed like the championship talk would really start coming up in the September Darlington race, because then you would have basically this gauntlet for everybody to go through. And really you have to be like an elite championship level driver to have a good run in that. And then that is always a springboard towards the championship run, because you're towards the end of the season. So on that note, I'm pretty happy about having the Southern 500 be the start for the playoffs. I think that's a great idea, quite honestly. That kind of creates a little bit of that mix of something old and something new that the throwback weekend's already done. Somebody did raise the issue that, it's going to mean that they're going to have to run the green splitters on the cars and the green window banners, and maybe that's going to take away a little bit from the throwback weekend. I do think it's nice. It was nice from having experienced it firsthand that the Southern 500 weekend is kind of its own thing. Sorry, just here's some commotion out there, but it's too bad that that takes away from it a little bit. But still, again, having it start the championship, it kind of fits in that flow of the season. So I'm okay with it starting the playoffs there. Looking further back, the Roval still in there. Again, Martinsville is the cutoff. I think is a great idea. I mean, Martinsville, it's been argued, has become kind of the Bristol night race, certainly with the new playoff schedule. But that's the interesting thing. And of course, Phoenix at the end of the year. Now, out of self-interest, I got to say, I like the idea of being able to be on the West Coast here and being within, relative driving distance of the championship race. On the other side of that, though, I think Homestead kind of developed, a nice option there where it's running something similar to an old Atlanta track, even though the new Atlanta track is running, is still running races. And it had its own personality, being a rough surface and everything, and being the championship finale when they first reconfigured it. And well, before that, of course, even too. But then through the reconfiguration, still being the season finale, and then eventually losing that date. One thing I would have liked is if they took Homestead and made it a 500-mile race. I think the championship race should be 500 miles. The season starts in a 500-mile race. It should end on a 500-mile race. I think, while the Homestead race may be, plenty long enough, I think that's where you get these interesting scenarios where it would be like, I think back to Rusty Wallace at Atlanta, having all the problems that he had, the number 27 car, and running like 18th and having all kinds of problems on pit stops and still having to stay in it because Dale Earnhardt's leading all the laps and win the race. Of course, under the playoff system, that would cost you the championship, because if your other championship contender is up there leading the most laps, they're going to win the race and win the championship, and you're just going to be toast. But, I think if you had a 500-mile race, even with the current point system, you see, what happened today, in the Texas race. I mean, that was a long enough race that Denny Hamlin was able to get back into that event, even after all the problems he had on pit road. And even Kyle Busch, with the problems he had so late in the race, he was able to kind of recover and get some of those spots back, but ultimately not be a factor in the race. You get that from a 500-mile race. You can get that in a 400-mile race. I'm not saying we haven't. We've had that with Kurt Busch in 2004. He had the problem where the wheel flies off and it causes a caution, but he makes it to pit road. Certainly that was a dramatic set of circumstances, and the race didn't need to be longer to accommodate that. But I would have preferred something like that versus moving it to another date. But I know that they're looking at some other options here, and the ISM company I know put in a ton of money to fix that track up. It really is a neat track to race to well, not to race on. I don't know what it's like to do that, but to experience a race. Their staff there is very cool, and it'd be interesting to see a championship settled there. Certainly, we've seen LASCAR championships settled there in the past, so that would be something. But that's basically kind of my thoughts on the schedule this year. I mean, I'm certainly intrigued. I mean, the Pocono thing is, I'm still haven't got my head around fully because I've always just had a kind of a, an axe to grind with those 2 dates there. But okay. I mean, if they want to try that, then all right. But hopefully this paves the way to some, even more interesting things once the contracts with the different tracks work out and we start seeing what happens beyond that. But that's kind of my thoughts there. Let's see. Let me check the feed here in the meantime. Oh, okay. Just checking out the Twitter feed here in the meantime. Let's take a look. I don't believe we have any word back on the disqualification results. We haven't had any issues with that this season so far. We are now about, we're coming up on 1 hour into the wait here for inspection. Pulling this one up here in the meantime as we check this. I just want to just keep this tab open. Good runs for some of the other drivers back at the field. Good to see Eric Jones get another good run today. He had a good showing there at Fontana before things went sideways on him. But an unfortunate deal there. Let me just take a look at your comments here. Let's see, just kind of your other thoughts on the schedule for next season. That's going to be the big thing. But yeah, I mean, the issues with having Daytona, being at that time of the year, I think that did seem to be. I know there's a lot of things you have to juggle because you have to juggle issues with weather patterns and with well, tradition always plays a role. I mean, I'm not going to pretend that it doesn't. And also with just what they mentally have in mind is that they're going to have a championship format that's going to start during football season. That's no coincidence. They're doing that, and they're pretty much committed to doing that and staying with it as long as they want to. Yes, and Andrew, thank you for bringing that up. No, I did not talk about the 2 weeks off for the Olympics. That's interesting. That's going to be kind of an adjustment a little bit there. Having the I know that there must have been real issues with the ratings in 2016 when they were running races. They were running races on like the other NBC networks at the time. I think in this day, it was talking about this the other day with the Olympics and the way they are and the way entertainment is really. You don't have to be necessarily glued to your TV to watch, Olympic events, especially if they're in a whole other time zone, a whole other country. If we're talking about the Olympics being in Tokyo, then where's the direct conflict with a race that's taking place during the day over here? We're talking about things that are, really different in that sense. Maybe the politics are the issue or anything, but it's going to be, a different issue there. But I don't know what it's going to be, going to be working with on that. I mean, if they want to show. I mean, they must be concerned about the NASCAR ratings in general, that they're not going to be worth running them during those 2 weeks, or maybe just not worth the effort and resources of the network to cover both those things at the same time. Although it seems like, I mean, at least from the Fox model, they seem to be taking an effort to kind of find ways that are a bit more affordable or a bit more streamlined in their broadcasts, like doing the digital studio here versus the Hollywood Hotel. I still think it's kind of unfortunate them transitioning that way, and certainly the way that they've done that, we're covering some races that are maybe out of market, like what they did with Mo Sport and having people off-site kind of broadcasting the races. That would be a troubling trend, but maybe there's some other things that they can work around it. But again, if you have the Olympics and you have these Olympic events taking place in a whole other time zone, and people are only interested in maybe watching certain events, and all that. I'm not sure the way that people enjoy watching Olympic events. Certainly since 2012, it feels like the whole streaming service and being able to watch events on demand and everything is the much more enjoyable way of watching it versus watching it live. Although in the social media era, certainly you want, there's some events that are going to be circled when certain athletes competing in this event or that event. You want to experience that live with everyone else and then get your reactions and everything. That's the other aspect of it. It's just a question of how many people are in one category versus the other. So, but yeah, if they cram that in there, they have a bit of a break. Maybe that'll work out and for the best for everyone, and they could at least advertise maybe the return to the series afterwards that way, much like they do with TV shows during the World Series on network TV and stuff like that for people that are into that. Let's see. Still waiting on the clicked on the wrong one there. I can't believe I completely forgot about this in the tweet there when I was mentioning how all these kind of quieter people or again not not bad drivers or not uninteresting drivers, certainly not in any of these cases, but drivers that tend to be a bit more quiet seem to be the sponsored by Hooters during the years, Hooters restaurants. You got Chase Elliott, you got Loy Allen, you got these other guys. I completely forgot about Rick Mast, and that does kind of blow my theory out of the water there. Rick Mast being the wild man that he is. So a very good point. There's an exception to every rule, so I guess that's certainly the one there, as was pointed out on there. I'm going to be interested. Yeah, Xfinity and the truck schedules. No ideas on that. I wonder. I mean, the race at Eldora still being in July. I wonder if that's going to be any issue with the Olympics, even though it's a midweek event. If they're going to try to move anything with that. I guess that'll be a big question mark on that part of the schedule. But other than that, I'm not sure how that's going to turn out. I think the Roval this year is going to be interesting. I mean, are we going to have the same issue with is it going to be nearly as entertaining as it was last year? I'm sure that's going to always be the issue for the promoters as well as everyone else. But I don't know what's going to happen there. Let's see. Oh yes, the qualifying format. This issue reared its ugly head back again this week. Again, looking over your guys' comments here. I didn't watch qualifying for the Cup race, but it sounded like it wasn't much of an improvement from Clint Boyer's interview and the accounts of Ryan Newman allegedly blocking the middle lane and making it difficult for people to get out. Again, it's the same thing again and we've talked about this in the past, that NASCAR does in a lot of these situations. Their solution, if there's a bad rule in place or something that's just not working, is just to create another rule. They want, if people don't like the flavor of new Coke, they're going to put more sugar in it. They're going to do this, they're going to do that, instead of just taking a few steps back and just going back to what worked originally. I do think that they're probably going to go back to single car qualifying, and what they'll do is they'll probably give it some kind of name like the new Coke situation did, where they call it qualifying classic, and just go back to single car qualifying. And hopefully they'll do multiple rounds. I think that's kind of played its course too. It's difficult to police in Formula One or IndyCar when you see it run there. I mean, there's a lot of little things that have to go exactly right. And the clip was posted. I need to find the person's account that put it up there, but it really drove the point home about why single car qualifying is as interesting as it is. I mean, if you watch any old qualifying format, it's easy to understand. And the thing I always go back to is when you're sitting in the grandstands, it's much easier to follow. You see this guy go by and, oh, he ranked there. You see this guy go by and, oh, he ranked there. And then there's that excitement when somebody actually takes the top spot. And, you hear the broadcast call. And Christian Espinoza, shout out to him there. If you check out his Twitter feed, at Christian_Racing, he has a clip for about 2 minutes of qualifying. I believe it's from 2007. It was like 2006 or 2007. at Charlotte, and you see the progression of different drivers trying to qualify and improve their speeds. Let me give you the link to the tweet so you can check that out here. It's actually good. It's some good action there at the front of the field. Let me get this. Does this work? Let me put that there. Okay, saying that the 4 and the 21 are going to R&D. Okay, do we have a call yet on the inspection queue? We're going to go ahead and check back there at the moment. We may have a call that may lock up the last place run for Kyle Larson or potentially for somebody else. Okay, no, that one's from earlier. That's a different one there. Okay, yes, it's taking several cars to the wind tunnel. Should get a list later tonight. Yes, there's a tweet that shows the 4 and the 21 going to the haulers that are not the teams. This was posted by another user, David T1414, and was then commented on by Bob Pockris. I'll post the link to this as well. Let me get that. Is that actually going to work in here? It should work. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, quick fire qualifying. I like that. That's probably the way that they'll do it. So yeah, I mean, this, you know, the single car qualifying is just the most logical thing. And again, it's been said a lot this last week that, you know, not everything in racing has to be equally dramatic. And well, actually, I take that back. It is dramatic. I mean, you just there has to be, you know, some sense of purpose in what's done at the track. Not everything is meant to be a race. And it's not a race to you know, to take your parking spot at the track. It's not a race to do other, you know, more mundane aspects of it. There's still mundane aspects of it, of racing. But when you qualify, it's just easier to say, okay, this person turned the fastest lap. And there's different factors that play in. Okay, is it better to qualify at the beginning of the session? Is it better to qualify at the end? Did you get an early draw? Did you get a late draw? And there's chance in every aspect of this, just like there is during a race. I mean, Kyle Busch is a perfect example of that from what happened to him today in the 18 car. Looked to have that race very well in hand, slipped up the track. Things just kind of went sideways from there, ended up costing him the race. The qualifying run could be the same thing. You just get one lap. You do the very best you can out there. You see if the car sticks. If it doesn't stick, you start 25th. That's just what happens. And then you get what's most interesting to me, and again, goes back to doing the starting grid videos, is when somebody does qualify well, it becomes a story. And, you know, you notice with the new format, it's very difficult to actually have a narrative where you say, okay, this is like the best qualifying run that this guy's had in 5 years, or this guy's had the best starting spot, you know, in 6 races, or he's never qualified better than this at this spot. You can still say that, but it just doesn't have the weight that it used to, because now it's the result of multiple rounds of qualifying. So, you know, again, it would be nice if you had bigger fields, and I know that that's been kind of the excuse, is that qualifying needs to be livened up because now, because of this charter system, we know 36 cars are going to be in this race, and we also know that there's fewer open teams than ever because it's unprofitable for them to be out there. They're basically getting squeezed out, and so you have problems with that. But you know, it's unfortunate because I know it's not 2007 anymore. You don't have a situation where you have tons of go or go homers, although we did have the top 35 rule back then, which was basically exactly what the charter system is now. It's just got one extra car, so we call it something different. But yeah, I mean, I mean, hopefully that changes up and people see the light on that. Let's take a look. We might have a call here. Okay, we have the Cup playoff grid here. Pockers just posted a few seconds ago, showing Kyle Busch, of course, now well, not of course, now the point leader, now over his teammate, Denny Hamlin, by 8 points. Of course, both of them locked in by virtue of their wins. For Kevin Harvick, I know a lot's been said about the struggles he's had this year and the fact that he's not winning. If you look at the point standings here, he's still just 33 points back of the lead, even without a win. So, you know, while of course, you know, you'd want to get a win and try to get back up there, and I'll post the link here so you guys can all see that as well. You know, he's not that far off not that far behind the curve. 7 races in, again, 33 points back of the lead, 25 points back of Denny Hamlin for second in the standings. Still very much a factor in everything. And once he gets a win, that'll keep him up there. And currently, you know, he's actually ranked because of that. He's ranked ahead of the 22 of Logano and the 2 of Keselowski, and which is really saying something because you hear about how dominant they've been this year. Certainly, the race at Texas wasn't the best event for any of them. Having the problems with the hood flapping up on the 22, Keselowski's mechanical issues, and then Ryan Blaney losing the engine there apparently with an overheating issue. But Kevin Harvick's still a factor. Wouldn't write him off. He could very well win next week, and then it'll be right back to the same routine we see with him every year, just cruising for the rest of the year and then seeing what happens in the championship round. But it's certainly a distinction different from what we've seen with Jimmy Johnson in last year. Although it was good to see Jimmy have a good run today. I kind of got the same sensation watching him fight to stay at the front of the field there with everybody else, like Joey Logano working him over there at the start. Kind of reminded me a little bit, even though I'm not big into Formula One, having watched the Senna movie and talking about him trying to just drive a car that's not very good up front while Michael Schumacher is working him over there, Senna and Schumacher at the start of those first few races in '94 and even through Imola. Of course, very different circumstances under that, but it kind of reminded me of maybe are we seeing a driver that's just that determined to stay up front, or are we really seeing a car that's really been improving? I mean, the Chevy's still trying to close the gap there and be as competitive as the Fords and the Toyotas. Are we still seeing problems with the Chevrolets, or is this just a case where the driver with all of his championships and everything like that is just gutting that car out there as best as he can, and it didn't quite work out in the finish there because he knows once he gets back in traffic, there's problems with the car. And it did seem like that was the case. Once he got past, it was very difficult for him to get back up there again and ultimately finished further back in the rankings. Just a thought on that. But, certainly the short tracks are kind of the way to bring people back even again. Chase Elliott, after his run at Martinsville, it'll be interesting to see what he can do at Bristol next week, a track that his father won at in 1988. But a different scenario there. Let me pull this up. Let's take another look at what else is going on here. We are down to, we have been an hour and 9 minutes into the wait here for the inspection results. Looking at the rest of Twitter right now. Taking several cars to the wind tunnel. Should get a list later tonight. Now, this will be interesting. If we get if these cars, I mean, they have brought some cars to R&D before, certainly under the old protocol. Is that going to delay in any way our results here from technical inspection? I did see them pushing the 11 through the garage area. That last tweet that was on there, but. Let's see. Let's see. Any other thoughts you guys have here in the meantime? Broadcast was interesting today, I gotta say. Between eating ice cream bars during not during the commercial breaks and stuff like that, but live TV, weird things happen. It's the same thing with this, of course. So, gosh, let's see here. Yeah, looking at the comments here, talking about the Dodges in 2004. That's a good point. Yeah, having when Dodge ran the older noses there for a little while, that would be that was always a weird time. I remember Ryan Newman was trying to run that at Homestead because he insisted that the Intrepid was running better than the Charger. Had some problems with those. I think was that 2005, so it'd be like the first year after that. I know that when they first did the shots of the new Dodge, that was the Charger in 2005. Like it looked like a school bus. Like they painted it on like the number 77 car, and it had like this really weird blunt nose to it, and they put it on the 77 car that was the Kodak car, and I swear that was the first thing I thought, is it looked like a school bus. It was big and square, and they ended up changing it a bit. They kind of pulled the snout out a little bit and changed it, and then that didn't work, so they leaned it back a bit. There were a lot of different changes they made to the Dodges then that year, and I guess we're it's interesting we're not seeing that so much with Chevrolet. In the years past, I mean, maybe it's just a difference with them having the splitter versus the old front valence. We're just not seeing the kick out on the nose they're given to the different manufacturers to level the playing field in some way. Although we haven't seen the Chevrolets, completely out to lunch this year. I mean, again, Chase Elliott, we talk about his run at Martinsville, and other teams contending for good positions, but there does seem to be a little bit of a drop off between the groups there. Let's see, looking at your comment there, Benjamin, you got looking at Mike Joy, Larry McReynolds, and Ricky Craven in the Fox booth. That would be pretty good. I know that the issue has been raised about whether whether they should just leave the third spot open, just have a couple of guys in there. But Larry McReynolds is a good personality and seems to have his head on his shoulders. I know I've criticized some of his memes that he does in a lot of these, talk about trends of the race and things of that nature. But maybe a consequence of that is more him not being in the booth like he was in the first part of the 2000s there. And Ricky Craven, I really like his commentary. He has a good good awareness of the sport, certainly from his history. I like his appearances on the weekly shows and everything. In the booth, I'm not sure. I think what's nice is what I always think is, again, I always go back to ESPN in the early 2000s, and perhaps that isn't fair for current groups because everybody brings something different to the table, but that was just the best balance. I think anything that brings it as close to that balance as possible is what the sport needs to angle towards. You need to have somebody that's a play-by-play person that is very professional. If they come off kind of stiff or wooden or anything like that, that's fine. You get somebody like Bob Jenkins that is very professional. Not to say he doesn't have a sense of humor or personality or anything, far from it. He really did. But he was always very matter of fact in the way he did his announcing. He was very firm in his role in the booth, and that's what it takes. I mean, Mike Joy and Alan Bestwick are ones that I think come the closest to that nowadays, and bringing that in there. They're the ones they're the ones I think need to be in that role. Rick Allen is very close to that. I think what's a little frustrating is he's got the voice for it. It's just something in the mannerisms I think is just a little bit lacking there. When he says like around goes the 3 and around goes the 7, and he falls into ruts on certain things that he's doing and is that. And I get that everybody has that when they're saying things. I'm certainly no exception myself. And things when I say, well, we'll have to see what happens with that. I say that constantly. But then you have that. You have the main guy that does the play-by-play. Then you have the color commentator that they can shout. They can be the one that says things kind of loudly and things like that. Benny Parsons was very good at that. Although I mean he would exclaim things, but it didn't seem like he would really yell things, or he wouldn't yell over somebody else. They wouldn't be like doing that at the same time. And then you have the quieter person that has more of the methodical. They kind of look to the after effects of things, or they look a different direction that the other two guys are going, and they see like whenever an accident happens, they say, "Oh, this person got collected too." Ned Jarrett was perfect at that too. So I think something that's close to that would be pretty good, and maybe Mike Joy, Larry McReynolds, and Ricky Craven would fit that. I mean, you have Mike Joy in the Bob Jenkins role, McReynolds in kind of the BP role, and Ricky Craven for kind of the quiet, more measured tone in the booth as well there. I still like, one person that I really thought was pretty good, and I may get some get some stuff like that, but I liked Brad Daugherty, quite honestly, at ESPN. I thought he felt I know that they had some weird gimmicks with ESPN, and there was a lot of stuff that I wasn't really happy about in those broadcasts in that time, which was unfortunate because it was very different from the old ESPN. But I liked Brad Daugherty. I thought he was the closest thing we had to BP since then. He did kind of the Buffet Benny thing where he would talk about local places to eat and stuff like that. And I thought that was great. And I thought he had a great personality. And again, not to say he doesn't have this now, of course. I mean, bring him back in there will be the same thing. But I think back to things like that. I remember he had the put a fork in him sketch like that, where he was talking about people being eliminated from championship contention. I thought that was fine. I thought, and again, his team ownership, of course, in the 2017 when they finally won Watkins Glen and him celebrating with Rusty Wallace. I thought he was great. I thought he was absolutely outstanding. So if you wanted to bring in a color commentator to do that, I'd be okay with that. I mean, if we're talking about a vacancy in a color commentator role, or somebody that is able to do something kind of like a Darrell Waltrip or a Benny Parsons role, I would recommend him. And Ricky Craven, yeah, as kind of the Ned Jarrett one, kind of a an older veteran angle, and somebody again that looks one way when other people, when the play-by-play and the color commentator are looking this way, you have this other analyst that's looking at the statistics and at the effects of things along the way. Craven strikes me as somebody that could probably do that. But it's I think that oh yeah, and yeah, Adam Alexander, I'm not a big fan of his, in the booth there. I know he has a passion for the sport, but again, much like he has a very similar issue to Rick Allen, which makes me think that I don't know if it's so much of a personality issue or talent issue, or if it's just the way they're being directed. Because again, I think I mentioned this about Rick Allen in the past. I think Rick did a really good job as a Truck Series announcer and seemed to have a very deep awareness of the sport and really good at emphasizing the importance of these competitors, and think it's had a genuine interest, much like Phil Parsons does in the Truck Series booth. Of course, his son racing in that, and also the other competitors there. But yeah, Adam Alexander, yeah, a pit road reporter, that would probably be a good spot for him. Vince Welch, no problems with them. I like Matt Yoakum on pit road. I don't have any problem with him. And it's unfortunate that we've seen, I think, more turnover on pit road than it maybe feels like it. But yeah, we don't have Dr. Dick Bergeron out there. I certainly go back to Dr. Jerry Punch and John Kernan back in the ESPN days. Glenn Jarrett, if you go further back to TNN, some great ones through there. And Bill Weber, you mentioned a Broken Sandman. That's a driver, a commentator. I never really had that much of a problem with. Like, I listened back. There's a call from Sears Point in 2008 where there's an accident in turn 7, and there's Wally Dallenbach and Kyle Petty are kind of shouting over each other, and there's kind of this rhubarb going on, and then he, over the top of that, has a distinctive enough voice, kind of like Eli Gold in a way, where he could say, look, this was it's like, oh, they collected McMurray and Stewart. Like, he got the important information out there. And he did it in a measured enough tone that you could tell what he's saying, that it's not just people shouting over each other. The people shouting over each other, that's the big thing that needs to end. That, and kind of this very casual, lackadaisical kind of way to broadcast where they're not bringing a lot of information in. And when they're bringing information in, it's just like somebody's birthday or something like that. And it's not like what's actually happening in the race. It's not in the present. It's something that somebody else could just look up. So yeah, anything that kind of escapes kind of the angle on, a play-by-play where it sounds like, again, somebody's just on the telephone or saying like, oh, this person is coming around the track. Like, there's an angle towards that where, I know that Ken Squire had that angle where, you would kind of slow things down a little bit when things are moving really quick and try to emphasize the gravity of a situation. But there's a fine line between doing it in such a way where there's gravity to your words, and then another way where it just sounds like you're not engaged in it. Like, either you're not engaged in it, or you don't know what's happening, or you don't care what's happening, which is frustrating because I'm sure with a lot of these people, they don't get where they get without having a knowledge of the sport or without an awareness of the sport. So I know it's not that, but it just feels that way. And it's really hard to describe. And this is where, again, I think it's an issue of direction and production. And, I know that, Fox in particular wins a lot of awards for the way they produce shows and stuff like that. And I know there's a lot of moving parts, but that's where maybe there needs to be certain aspects of it that need to be kind of brushed up. Because I get the sense sometimes that there's kind of a kind of kind of resting on your laurels. Like, you get in a rut, and it's like, okay, each week we're going to do it this way. We're going to do it this way each time, no matter what happens. We're going to do it this way every time. Every time it's going to be treated the same way. If somebody spins, we're just going to say the car number. And I feel like it's almost like a kind of computer program aspect to it, which is weird. But hopefully that changes. I mean, maybe it's just it's always going to be a gradual progression there, and if it's going to be a different network or different people coming on board. I know that they are trying things. They bring in Jeff Gordon, and they put people in different places. I've talked in the past about I think Jamie McMurray is doing a decent job in his commentator role. Just as an aside there, it seems like he's loosened up a little bit versus the way he was as a driver, which I think was interesting. I think maybe that's just a consequence of how much he was struggling those last couple of years with Ganassi. But he seemed at least in today and like the last few weeks, I thought he was a little bit more relaxed there with that. So maybe he's falling into a role that's working out better there. And I think it's going to take something like that in the booth to kind of fix the issues they have. But I'm not quite at the point where you just need to just tear it all down and start over again, where I had been in the past, because there are some pieces that are working. I do think, that Mike Joy has shown, a lot of flexibility and ability to play off different people, but you got to surround people with the right people. And I just don't think they're quite there yet. So as long as they're still working on it, I'm satisfied with that. You mentioned Steve Burns there, Andrew. Yeah, I mean, my gosh, I miss that guy out there so much. I mean, I've brought up this in the past with some of these pit road reporters. They're ageless to me. Like, I just assume they've always been there and they're always going to be there. I don't know how old Matt Yoakum is or some of these other guys, but I mean, I think back to years ago, him doing him and Kevin Harvick playing off each other when they're wearing the big Power Rangers uniforms for TNT with the big red logo and all that, and Harvick is dressing up and putting padding underneath it and stuff and making fun of him. I mean, those are things like that I'd like to see more of. Like, I mean, those are the moments. Like, even you don't have to go even far enough back to, like, the ESPN days. And you know what thing, to bring this to full circle, one thing that actually allowed that to happen? Single car qualifying, because you had time you had to fill. It wasn't just a whole lot of stuff happening in a very short time. You had everybody going out there one car at a time for a couple hours. And if it took a couple hours, okay. And then you fill that time with the interesting stuff. I mean, people have said that the rain delay broadcasts are some of the highest rated broadcasts they get, because you see these drivers loosen up and kind of catch them off guard with things. And I think if you give more opportunities for that, that could be a thing that could take care of, two things at once. So, we'll see. I'm about to say it again. We'll see what happens there. Still not seeing the official results from technical inspection here. Just again, the information of the cars being sent to R&D. I don't know if that's the end of the story or if we're going to have any other information tonight. I don't know if that's something different, certainly from past races that we're seeing, but I imagine they're not going to wait too much longer on that. We're coming up on the mark that we usually start hearing news on that. So let's see. Yep, there we go. Yeah, Steve Burns trying to get into people's motorhomes during the rain delay. Yeah, things like that. No, good times. And that's from somebody like me, that I really don't like rain delay coverages. Whenever the rain comes, I just think, okay, well, now this is time I can run a couple errands and get back, and they'll still be drying the track, even with the air tightened. Because I figure even in most times it's going to be, a couple hours before any of that gets done. We're coming down to we have reached about an hour and 25 minutes, I believe. And I was just looking at this here. Yes, an hour and 25 minutes approximately since I started the timer there. We should have results from this at any moment. But yes, so I'm just going to open it up to the floor at this point. Any other questions or any other issues that I need to be covering here that I haven't talked about? Let's see. We have the results. Still waiting on it. It's going to be. I'm still a little disappointed we didn't get a Keselowski article this week. I had kind of an outline for that coming together, and I'm going to have to redraft that. So I apologize in advance if it's a little bit later. We get the articles for the Xfinity and the top three articles for the last place finishers deals here tonight. The Xfinity and the truck ones, actually, I just outlined those this week too, but I got a little bit more done on that. Stopped short on the beyond just the raw statistics themselves. So hopefully that won't take quite as long to put together. And let's see. Yeah, no, exactly. You mentioned, yeah, the Beast of Metal. You got the issues where you see these teams during get some actual attention before the race itself, or just any attention at all. It used to be you could get some broadcasts that are going to show a large part of the field if you're going to go through the field or something like that. But I think what was interesting too is when you would see the cars during qualifying, sometimes they would look different from the race. I One thing I've seen the more races I've covered is that they don't not all teams have the decals all entirely set on the cars when they leave the shop. Especially on lower end teams, you kind of get guys coming back from the garage area, and they're arranging a decal on the hood of the car, and maybe it's a car that they just brought back from another race where they didn't have sponsorship, and they just had they cleaned it off and took the other decals off, put new things on. That's why I always like, especially covering a race, I really want to make sure I go there for like the first day of the weekend, because that's when you see stuff like that. I've seen Premium Motorsports and Dusty Whitney's old team do that, and stuff like that. Those are always interesting. You ask about Marty Reed, Broken Sandman. That's gosh, this is a guy that I thought he was fine. I think he'd be interesting in a um, compared to some of the other guys. I do think he sounded engaged in what was happening. He had certainly some interesting inflections in what was going on. I know that there were some issues with ESPN's coverage again. Anybody that was kind of under that penumbra, I think there was an issue with direction again in general, because they had a lot of talent that was good. You had Dr. Jerry Punch and others that had their chops, that knew what they were doing, but it just felt like they weren't given the resources they needed to be the very best they could be. And Marty Reed is kind of like another one of those guys. Another thing with Marty Reed that comes immediately to mind is that he seemed like he was unfortunately present for a lot of more difficult times in the sport's history, and covering like things like Jeffrey Bodine's terrible accident at Daytona in 2000, Dan Weldon's accident at Las Vegas in 2011, things of that nature there. I think that, I don't know if that affects somebody's call or anything like that, but I think that under those circumstances, in both cases, I think he handled those very well. Yeah, he did. Yeah, Marty Reed did the IndyCar towards the end. I thought he did, because he. I remember. That's right, because he was always the one that did the "Until We Meet Again" at the end of the broadcast, and he mentioned why he never said goodbye because it sounded too final, and then he said goodbye to Dan Weldon. I thought that was very profound. In similar circumstances with Jeff Bodine's Truck Series accident, not knowing what was happening, and seeing that accident and not knowing the outcome, and everybody just being quiet. You're still the lead broadcaster. You got to carry him to commercial and try to not speculate, and try to get the information as best he could. I think he did a good job with that. He had some very difficult circumstances, which I think would be difficult for any broadcaster to handle. And I think that's the real test for a lot of these guys, which again makes me think back to, of course, Bob Jenkins' call with and Benny Parsons' call with J.D. McDuffie's accident in 1991. The ability to handle those situations, and you certainly never hope that those things happen. But if they do, you certainly hope that it is portrayed as accurately as possible, that you don't speculate, that you give the information that and you stick with that. So in that respect, I do believe Marty Reed was a decent broadcaster, and it would be interesting to see if he could do some more work in the sport. That just showed the 1 hour and 30-minute mark we've reached, waiting for the inspection results, at least since the more subdued burnouts for Denny Hamlin there, as the NASCAR officials were telling him to not go entirely crazy, tearing up the back of the car. I do see a couple tweets on Bob Pockrass's account. We may have a call here. Let's see. What is this? Okay. Okay. The report now, cars being taken to the wind tunnel, not for technical inspection, but for parity testing. Okay, so it sounds like, okay, this is something separate and apart from the inspection protocol. One report from a Albert DeRosa that was posting to Pockrass a little while ago said that they took Harvick's car. Apparently, Harvick's car involved in being collected for parity testing between the manufacturers. Perhaps that's where the other cars were being brought in. The picture as well, although they took the 21 as well in the other shot, showing that the Paul Menard's car to be brought in. So I don't know if it's parity between the same manufacturer or parity among manufacturers. Not entirely sure what the protocol is with that. Let's see. This battle for fifth is there. We wanted. Okay. Interesting retweeting a comment from Steve O'Donnell here at OD Steve. A simple way to explain what we've wanted. When you see the leader heading into a turn, was second or third anywhere close in the TV shot last year? No. Today, absolutely. That was 20 or 30 laps into a green flag run. Okay, it looks like it's an issue talking about the approach to the broadcast, similar to what we were talking about in terms of the camera work. I know that there's been a lot of issues about requests for pulling the cameras back a bit and getting a more full field view. It sounds like Steve O'Donnell weighing in on other people talking about the aspects of the broadcast. Just retweeted on the Pockrass account here. Let's see. Anything else on here? Alrighty. And see, yep, no call yet. Not seeing anything on the Pockrass account. That's usually the go-to. Oh, we got a couple more tweets. Let's take another look here. Looks like he's just commenting on other posts being posted recently here. Looks like he's kind of in a holding pattern as well, waiting for results. Looks like Steve O'Donnell is continuing to post a couple other tweets. They're talking about the many controversial penalties. The uncontrolled tire issue certainly seemed to be a big issue today. It seemed like in the past it was always the driving through too many pit stalls issue that had caught a lot of people. But today, what is in control and what is not, and whether you're, it seems like it's almost you have to have a conveyor belt or a chain reaction to different crew members standing there. One person touches it, and then the next person in line touches it, and then everybody needs to just walk out with their arms in a T pose here or something to see if they're actually in range to touch the tire. I wonder if they do that in their pit road practices or not. If they don't, they're probably going to end up starting to, because they're getting really picky on these inspection calls. Still waiting for results here. Boom. Not seeing anything new here. Let's take a look here as well. Still checking out the results. I like these broadcast comparisons, looking at the camera work from one broadcast to the next. I'll go ahead and post this in here too, again from Christian Espinosa's channel. Taking a look here. Oop. Kind of seeing like the way, kind of addressing what Mr. O'Donnell is addressing here about the camera being pulled in versus getting some long distance shots here. I mean, you want to see the leader of the race, certainly, but I think you're also, when you're watching a race, you're watching a race. You're not just watching, one car rolling by itself here. In this particular example, it's I wonder if you're getting a good sense of the difference in speed in this as well. But yeah, a little bit. I guess it's really hard to tell how much slower they're going. Well, no, actually, yeah. Looking at the top shot of Kyle Busch going across the start-finish line, it definitely looks like it's going pretty quick. But yeah, it's actually kind of some pretty different shots there as well. Let's see. Yeah, between the different packages they've run this year, maybe it was just the track that they're running it at, but I kind of like the way that they ran it at Atlanta better. I think that they had a really nice setup going there, and maybe it's just the surface of the track and doing that, but it seemed like it worked a little better without the aero ducts on it. But again, every one of these races they're going to, we're going to find out how much of an effect it has versus others. Looking further down. Let's see. But all right. Just looking over your comments again here, make sure I didn't miss anything else here. Yeah, stacked racing schedule in March. See, that's news to me. So I don't had different issues there. I haven't followed sports car racing quite as closely as anything else in stock car racing at the moment. But let's see. Well, we're certainly looking ahead to Bristol next week for something a little different. It's kind of weird to maybe we're not really getting this in next year's schedule so much, but it kind of a short track season. If you watch like an old ESPN broadcast, they would do Wilkesboro, Martinsville, and Bristol in some kind of order that was pretty much close to the spring there. That was always interesting to see. Of course, with the number of short tracks now, it's a little bit different. All right. But let's see. So we had a good. Did I mention Jesse Iwuji? I know I mentioned him briefly, but he had a good finish in that Truck Series race too, running in the 17th spot. And there's Ray Cicerelli as well in the 16th, both getting the top 20s. So there've been quite a few. I mean, there was a lot of wrecks that kind of brought those guys up there, but I mean that still takes some talent to get a good finish there. Jesse is still a relative newcomer to the Truck Series now. Again, driving the other Realm truck while Josh was running in the last spot there. Wuji in his fourth start, finishing in the 17th position. What was amazing about that, this was reported, I think Wuji posted it himself. He had to report for duty. He's active in the military and the Navy, I believe, if I remember correctly, that he had to report. So he had to go from Las Vegas, I think it was out in Southern California to it just that night, and reported, and then came back and is now running the Texas race and gets his best finish of the season. Hadn't finished any better than 25th in his previous 3 starts. So good to see him get a good finish. Let's see. Oh yes, the finish in the K&N West race at Irwindale. That's a track I haven't been to yet, even as a Californian. That's one place I got to definitely check out. But I haven't seen it yet. I saw the finish there, and that the winner wrecking across the line, and that'll be something else. But pretty competitive. Let me see. Okay. Yeah, kind of weird to have all these several cement mixers lined up on the infield at the Texas Motor Speedway this weekend. There were speculation about a possible remodeling at the track again, or a possible reconfiguration. I'll post the picture in the tweet, but apparently Bob Pockris clarifying these images here that this was a partnership with U.S. Concrete. So I guess they had a sponsor event out there and lined up several concrete trucks in the infield. So you get a good look at that there. There's 37 of them from that shot. I tell you what, if they ever had a pothole at any one of these tracks, they'll be prepared for it there. So that was a different deal. But yeah, I guess pretty happy they have the truck race in the spring. You don't have to wait for the fall race there. Although the June event, I mean, we'll see how many trucks they have show up to that one. It's going to be might be a little bit different there with having it be a standalone, separate from the Cup Series and the Xfinity Series. So let's see. Come on. I really thought we'd get a call by now. That's interesting. I don't know what this now. Again, I don't like to speculate, but I don't know what this means in terms of them taking a long time on this, unless there's anything else I'm missing. I'm going to try another account. Make sure. Do. But not seeing, yeah, it's been a few, most of the other media outlets, it's been kind of quiet here since the finish of the race in terms of getting a call on it. Let's see. Any other information here? Not seeing it at the moment. Let me go over some other information I have here on the articles while we're waiting here. First of all, in the Truck Series side, this is going to be posted in the. Let's get the. It's going to be posted a little bit later tonight when we get the articles finished up here. As mentioned before, Josh Rialman's last place finish in the Truck Series race on Friday. That was his first last place finish in the Truck Series competition. However, he did finish last in the Xfinity race at Iowa on June 18th, 2016, when he was driving for RSS Racing. So the same team that Jeff Green now drives for, and finished last in the Saturday race. Although he was driving the 93 and Green was driving the number 38. The Truck Series effort, the Riam Brothers team, they had one last place finish before. That was with Chad Finley when he drove the number 33 last fall at Martinsville. Had an accident early in the race and trailed that event. And this was also the first last place finish for a truck number 33 at Texas. Those are the statistics for that article. Looking now at the Xfinity article with Jeff Green, this is actually his seventh last place finish at Texas in the Xfinity series. But for the car number 38, it's actually been much longer time since that number has actually finished last in an Xfinity series race. Most recent time it happened was on November 4th, 2006, by the late Jason Leffler. He lost the engine on the Great Clips Chevrolet. And after 55 laps of the O'Reilly Challenge, and that was the reason for the last place finish there. Looking ahead to the number 42, if we do actually get Kyle Larson's last place finish here today, it looks to be the case, although again, no official word from NASCAR at the moment while we wait for the inspection results. We look at the number 42. The last time the number 42 finished last, I believe, was it? Yes, it was last spring at Talladega, almost a year, April 29th, 2018 at Talladega. Kyle Larson involved in one of the accidents in that race. Ended up finishing last after completing 71 laps. And Texas, it hadn't happened since 2008 in November. This was a wreck of Juan Pablo Montoya, completed 262 laps before he was taken out. Now, if I remember correctly, I believe that was the accident where he and David Gilliland tangled up on the backstretch, and Gilliland got parked as a result. That was an unusual set of circumstances there. I think that was in 2008 because Gilliland was in the 38 both years, but that wasn't when he was driving the M&M's paint scheme. That was when the Yates team was kind of scaling back a little bit with their sponsorship. Let me look at the results on that to verify that. Got that one there too. Okay, we have a call. Oh, perfect timing. We have a call. Bob Pockris posting, tech is done. No issues. Denny Hamlin is the winner, and constructively, Kyle Larson is your last place finisher. One lug nut not safe or secure on Arc Almirola's car, the number 10, which is a fine. Two cars from each manufacturer to the wind tunnel. So for Toyota, that would be Denny Hamlin, the race winner, as well as Eric Jones, Kurt Busch, and William Byron out of Chevrolet, and Kevin Harvick and Paul Menard from Ford. So that explains why the 4 and the 21 were queued up to that hull earlier. So it is two cars from each manufacturer for the level playing field test among the manufacturers, but they're not going to just take one car from each. It is two cars from each, 6 cars total. So yes, Denny Hamlin, your race winner. Kyle Larson is now your last place finisher at Texas. Again, his first last place finish in nearly a year since last spring at Talladega. So again, that'll about do it for this week's disqualification show. We will find out if anything different happens at Bristol. We go to Thunder Valley next week. Again, stay tuned for the next episode of The Terrible Broadcast, which will be available publicly on YouTube this Wednesday. Definitely check out my Patreon, patreon.com/lastcaronbrock for more information on last place finishers. Check out my website, lastcar.info, or my Twitter at lastcaronbrock. As always, thank you all very much for your support and sticking with me here. Keep those questions coming, and anybody else that's interested in the news here from the back of the field, and definitely any other ideas to your features you want to try out on the show or anything like that, or ideas to come along the way, because sometimes it runs long here, and it's always interesting to kind of figure out different things happening behind the scenes. Definitely leave a comment if you're interested. And again, thank you very much for your support.